Alex Stardy here with Weather Echo. All right, we've had some thunderstorms, we've had muggy conditions, really warm across the west. Now we're looking at cooler weather moving in for the next week. Cooler weather in the far west. We've also got the latest fall and winter outlook. So you tuned in perfect time to see that. Let's take a look at this latest insight. All right, I started it off first here. Here's the fall outlook, followed by the winter outlook. So even though we see cooler conditions here in the second week of September, we're looking at warmer, if not much warmer conditions across most of the U.S., especially the Rockies and the Great Basin area. Now this is for the fall, so September through November. Now in terms of precipitation, what are we looking at? We are looking at potential active weather pattern for the Pacific Northwest, so wet conditions there moving across into Canada. So we're also looking at potential for a lot of tropical moisture, but not in California, in the Gulf and also around Florida, as shown here. So the green shaded is wetter than normal. The brown shaded areas are drier than normal. That's much of the south, all the way into the mid-Atlantic area. So warmer and drier is the outlook for this fall for much of the Great Basin, the West, and most of California. Now, taking a look at December through February, what are we looking at? So the dry weather is expected to be across California and the southeast United States. Now, this does not mean we won't have storms, won't have rain. We'll still have atmospheric rivers and still have a few big storms. But overall, drier than normal, and it's really focused on northern California. And that is because of blocking upper ridge. And we know what that's done before, like in 2020 and 2021, those years. So it really emphasizes northern California, slightly drier than normal potential for southern California, and notably drier than normal for British Columbia and for southeast United States and the northern parts of Florida. So this is December through February. Now, contrary to that, wetter, snowier conditions across the northern plains, Great Lakes, and possibly into northern New England. Also note an area of wet conditions out near Hawaii as well. So some of that moisture might be able to break through into Southern California, but for the most part of the winter, it looks like it's going to stay in that area. And also, this same storm track, this amplified pattern over the ridge or over the blocking high, as we call it, is going to produce wetter conditions in Alaska. So this is the latest outlook for December through February precipitation pattern. Okay, for temperature, well, that blocking upper ridge is going to create warm conditions over the Pacific, warm up until Alaska. That could be moist up in Alaska, and then warm conditions across much of the west and the deep south. So by far and large, a warmer than normal winter. Now, December through February, when we normally see some Arctic outbreaks, we still think we're going to see that because we're expecting near average conditions, which is still really cold, for the Canadian border and much of Canada and into the Great Lakes area. So just because you see white and very little blue doesn't mean it won't be cold. It'll be bitterly cold at times, and we'll see Arctic outbreaks. The Arctic outbreaks are generated by the upper ridge in the East Pacific. So that amplified pattern really helps to draw colder air into the United States. So we are expecting that. And whenever you get cold air, you have a better chance for seeing snowstorms and nor'easters or unusual snow further south. Okay, now let's shift gears here. Let's talk about this recent monsoon. Did it materialize? Well, we had some big storms. I'm showing you a few of them here. I'm going to highlight September 4th. We had some storms in Southern California that were pulse thunderstorms, really large, intense storms that only lasted about an hour, hour and a half. But boy, did they produce rain. They produced hail. As shown here, the indications of these storms were that they were very intense. One of them was in the Interstate 8 corridor in San Diego County, as shown on the left-hand side here. Another one was southwest of Borrego. And I took some photos of them as well near their maximum intensity. Now, we also had widespread precipitation and rain and lightning across California. Now, unfortunately, some of that lightning triggered more wildfires in central California near Yosemite. Now, in Southern California, it was a wetting rain, so that was good, even though we had lightning in places like Ramona, Borrego, Mount San Jacinto, and even the Big Bear region. Now, if you remember, there were two weather systems that came in. One of them came in off the Pacific. That produced the thunderstorms in the Central Valley of California and the Sierra Nevada. Another one came up from the south, and that produced those early morning 7 a.m. thunderstorms as shown here in the upper left in Borrego Springs. And we saw cumulus clouds and even some thunder reported all the way to Escondido. So that tropical moisture surge, we call it a pseudo-monsoon because it was forced northward by a East Pacific trough. It brought a lot of moisture, muggy conditions, and warmer conditions, and those are going away, slowly shifting to the east. Okay, so how are we doing so far? So we look back to June through July, August, and early September. Unfortunately, still really dry conditions across much of the west, especially the Great Basin and even northern Arizona, where we really needed rain to limit the fire potential for this late summer and early fall. Pacific Northwest, they still are much below normal, and they've also been warmer than normal. And you can see that warmer than normal translates all the way from the Pacific Northwest through the Great Basin into Arizona. Now, California, we did see some beneficial rain. The lightning wasn't helpful, but beneficial rain. And so we really have an area, a narrow area of wet to wetter than normal from southeast Oregon, northern California, down the Sierra Nevada into the Imperial Valley of Southern California. So this monsoon came really late in the year. It came in late August and early September. So we had a really slow start. That's usually the peak of the monsoon. So this monsoon did not produce widespread precipitation that we really needed across the west, as shown here. Okay, across the United States, you can see the very dry signature in the Great Basin, Pacific Northwest, also in New England. But we also had some very wet signatures. Remember how wet it started off in Texas and even New Mexico, the northern plains. But we had some wet conditions also for much of the summer, especially in July for the Mid-Atlantic region. And overall, you can see temperatures were warmer than normal over most of the United States for this summer. Most noticeable, again, was the Pacific Northwest and the Great Basin area. We even had some pockets of cooler with all that precipitation in North Texas and the lower plains. And then, of course, the California coast, we can't forget, even though it was very dry, we didn't see any precipitation in the spring or summer in that area. Temperatures were actually normal to a little bit below normal on the California coast. Okay, what's the weather pattern coming up that's going to give us cool conditions? Well, as you would expect, an upper level trough or a piece of the jet stream is going to break off and move across northern California and the Pacific Northwest. This means not just cool, but a lot of showers and widespread rain for northern California, Oregon, and Washington. So those areas have been dry, as I showed, especially in Washington and western Oregon along the coast. So this is beneficial rain. They did have an atmospheric river earlier this summer, but this is really good rain that they need, and rain that they often get in September from these type of systems. This will also bring cooler, drier conditions across Southern California as the heat dome is squashed, pushed to the east into the Central Plains area. We also see continued cool weather for the Northeast as the jet stream is taking a little bit of a dip across New England area, but overall not severe as that retreats later in the week. So the bottom line coming up is this cooler weather pattern being driven by an upper level trough or storm system, early season Pacific storm, not strong, but dipping across Northern California. So we could see rain from along I-80 all the way up into Seattle. Really the significant rain though will be far northern California, Oregon, and Washington. That monsoon and that heat dome is all suppressed, so cooler, drier conditions across California. And with this trough or with this storm system, that'll really help mix out the marine layer. So we'll have nice sea breeze days, still with sunshine. All right, hope you enjoyed this latest weather insight. We included climate information, the short-term weather for the upcoming week here in the second week of September, and we also talked about the fall and winter precipitation and temperature outlook. More information is always posted with a lot more details about the outlook on our weather blog, so check out the notes on our weather blog. You can sign up and get those by email. All right, everyone, thanks for joining.